Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. In this episode, I've got some incredible, kind of explosive audio that I really want you to hear. Give me a little bit of time and I'm going to get you completely caught up on a lot of the big issues that Canadians are talking about right now. On this episode, some of these topics are a little Ontario-centric, and I don't want that to turn off the rest of Canada just because I'm going to talk about some Ontario-specific issues, because some of these have applications just about anywhere in Canada. Things like selling our infrastructure, things like bail reform, things like dangerous driving. There's a number of things that have come up, and I'm going to talk about those in this episode of Scott Fox After 9. Plus, I've got more on Mark Carney's conflicts. That's right, he has conflicts. You may be shocked to hear. But he still owns a lot of stock in Brookfield, and Brookfield's doing well. And, well, the Prime Minister is in a position where he could make Brookfield do really well, depending on how contracts are awarded and things like that. So you're going to hear a little bit of testimony from a House of Commons committee hearing about the Prime Minister's conflicts in this episode. All that and a lot more ready to go. To start off, I'm going to go to yesterday. I don't often play audio from a provincial question period, but I want to play a little bit of what happened yesterday in Ontario. Let me set the scene. It's Queen's Park, the Ontario legislature. On the government side, you've got Ontario Premier Doug Ford. And then on the opposition side, you've got New Democratic Party leader Marit Stiles. Up in the gallery, a whole bunch of protesters that are protesting changes that were voted on yesterday and approved, changes to the rental laws here in Canada. And you've probably heard about this. This has to do with Bill 60. Google it if you want to know all the details. There's a lot of people protesting, saying that it means that landlords are going to be able to throw people out on the streets and things like that. I mean, yeah, and that might happen. I'm not going to say it's not going to. I'm also not an expert in this area. But one thing I will say before I get to some of this exchange yesterday is we needed change. There's a lot of problem tenants that have figured out how to game the system, and they're taking advantage of good landlords. People that are doing everything right. They've got a nice, suitable place that's up to code and well-maintained, and it's offered at a great rate for someone to rent. But sometimes those tenants take advantage of loopholes in the system and they refuse to go. They refuse to pay their rent. They exploit how long it takes for tribunal hearings and appeals. And there needed to be something done for the people who have got good money invested into properties, creating rental units, but there's problem tenants that, again, are gaming the system. So if you want to know all the ins and outs of Bill 60, feel free to Google it. The news is making this out to be a travesty, making it seem like imminently thousands and thousands more people are going to become homeless. In reality, that's simply not true. What the government did was pass a bill that needed to be passed. Is it perfect? Probably not. Again, I'm not an expert in this area, but I do know that changes needed to be made. So while the protesters are up in the gallery, you've got the government and the opposition squaring off here at Queen's Park. Let's play a little bit of the exchange between Marit Stiles and Ontario Premier Doug Ford. This gets really feisty. Listen to this.
You know, investing $3.2 billion in St. Thomas, along with the Volkswagen, along with hundreds and hundreds of other companies investing in Ontario, because we created the climate. I don't know if you heard the news, Madam Speaker, because they sure never heard the news. 350 million people in the U.S. created 119,000 jobs. 16.3 million people in Ontario created 55,000 jobs. 55,000 jobs with 16 million compared to 350 million. You know, that says it all. If you were in charge, you couldn't run a lemonade stand, you'd bankrupt the lemonade stand in about 10 seconds.
Okay, Premier Ford had his mic cut off. One of the things I like to do is, number one, declare my bias. So you know, I consider myself a conservative. That's my political stripe, but more so I identify with the middle class, and there's no party that's looking out for the middle class. But even though I'm a conservative, I do feel comfortable calling out things that I see are wrong. There's Premier Ford bragging about how Ontario created 55,000 new jobs last month, and that is the number that StatsCan came out with. I mean, look around. Does any single person listening right now believe that 55,000 new jobs were created last month in Ontario? Anybody? Or is it possible StatsCan puts out all kinds of numbers that are very favorable for the government and for the Bank of Canada? Government gets good talking points. They can tell the people, shut up. We're creating lots of jobs. You've got nothing to complain about. And then the Bank of Canada uses those numbers and says, wow, the job market is very robust. We don't need to lower interest rates anymore. Personally, this is just my opinion. I have zero time for the data that's been put out by StatsCan in probably the last 5 to 10 years. I think that it's inaccurate. I just don't think it passes the smell test that 55,000 new jobs were created in Ontario last month. I just don't believe it. But anyway, you heard the Premier accuse the Leader of the Opposition of being incapable of running a lemonade stand. He said you would bankrupt the lemonade stand. Okay, let's see where this goes.
Question, Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, I'll say it again. At least my lemonade stand was legal.
There you go.
Oh, he's talking tough over there, Speaker. Premier's talking tough right now. But I'll tell you one thing, Speaker. I've worked hard my whole life, and I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. Right? So you can keep it coming. It is good.
Order.
It is good to see, Speaker.
Order.
It is good to see the Premier finally get up and answer a question in this House. We only sit in this House for a few weeks, and despite that, the Premier last week decided to adjourn the House so that he could get his MPPs and himself to his fundraiser faster. You know, while people are lining up at food banks in the province of Ontario, what is this government's priority? It is increasing limits for individual donations to political parties. Why is this Premier's priority to issue
Response.
American-style politics and law?
Response. I recognize the Premier of Ontario.
You know something, Madam Speaker? I wish my dad was here. That started from nothing in our basement, in the basement on the ping pong table, and grew a company. When I came into it, it was a small printing company, like 98% of companies around Canada. We worked 18 hours a day building that company. We grew that company to employ hundreds and hundreds of people, not just here. In the U.S., we expanded. You don't have a clue how it is to start a business, to meet a payroll, to come up with a marketing plan, and create thousands of jobs. That's your problem. That's why you'll never be Premier.
You'll never be Premier.
You'll never be Premier. You'll never be Premier.
Oh, the politicians are yelling at each other here, everybody. Throwing around outrageous accusations like you'll never be Premier to the Leader of the Opposition. And if we're being honest here, I think everybody can accept the fact that he's right. She's never going to be the Premier. We'll have an Ontario Liberal government before we'll have an Ontario New Democratic Party government. And that's just the way it is. And all the polls certainly support that statement. Now, the Premier is quite right. Very, very successful businessman. His father started the business. Doug and his brother, I believe Rob was involved a little bit, although I don't want to say that for sure. I know definitely Doug was involved in growing that small business into something much bigger. And yeah, he's right. He has had to do a marketing plan. He has had to make a payroll. He has had to go through the ups and downs of the economy. He knows what he's talking about. He's got some credibility in that department. But that kind of language, is that becoming of a premier? Well, it seems like there's a heck of a lot of mudslinging going around. Just a couple of days prior, Marit Stiles from the NDP was kicked out of the legislature for calling the government corrupt and refusing to withdraw the comment. It's getting real juvenile in politics here, and I think part of the problem is that nobody wants to answer a question anymore. Question period is all for show. Case in point, I was watching the federal question period for a minute yesterday, and I noticed one of the cabinet ministers, someone running a department in government, had to read from a script his answer to a question. How is that even possible that the minister in charge can't even answer a question without his staff scripting an answer for him? It's embarrassing. It really is. But staying with this Ontario theme here for the beginning of this episode of After 9, I want to play something else for you. It was, I believe, Ontario's Attorney General or Solicitor General. Michael Kersner is his name, and he proposed something new yesterday when it comes to bail laws. We've talked a lot about how bad our bail system is right now. We've got a catch and release system. Police can arrest someone in the morning. They're back out committing another crime the same day. Sometimes before the cops are even done the paperwork from the first arrest, these guys are being brought back in again. It's a revolving door, and the criminals know it. They know it. So we need some changes. The federal government has proposed some changes. Now, I still don't think they go far enough. I think that what the Conservatives were proposing is probably what we need in Canada right now until we get the crime under control. Crime thrives when the economy is bad. That's something we've known since the beginning of time. When people get broke, they get desperate, and that's when crime happens. And we've got a perfect storm here. We've got very lax criminal justice laws, particularly around bail and mandatory minimums and the Youth Criminal Justice Act, etc. And we've got a government that doesn't seem all that interested in solving the problem. They seem to thrive off of the chaos. Well, after the last election, the Liberals had a real close call. They almost lost that one, and they certainly realized they need to do something. So they've proposed some changes in Ottawa. But the province can play a role here. In fact, all of them can. So yesterday, the Ontario government announced proposed changes when it comes to bail. They're going to make you put up money. Listen to this. It's about 40 seconds long.
Today, as we have done before, we're coming forward again with bold, innovative, and practical solutions to enhance our public safety. And the reason is obvious. Our government has never stopped in believing that our inherent right to live safely in our own homes and communities is the guiding principle that drives our actions every day to protect Ontario. Tomorrow, I will be proud to rise in the legislature and table a bill that will set out how our government, under the leadership of Premier Ford, will protect Ontario.
This is a very interesting one, and it's one that I think we need to hear the details on. I'm wondering why now. The Premier and the provincial government has been calling for changes for well over a year now. And now they're just stepping up themselves to make this change. And I'm wondering why now? Why at this particular moment? Did something egregious happen and you thought, we can't stand another second of this? Was everything up until now okay? Why didn't they do this sooner? Well, the fine print is going to give us a lot more information. You're going to have to put up cash to get out of jail on bail. That's a tough one. I mean, this is something that we should definitely talk about before we just rubber stamp this and send it through. Because I know most people probably here, you're going to have to pay and put a deposit down if you want bail. And if you skip bail, if you don't show up for court, if you commit another crime, you forfeit that money. Okay, that makes perfect sense to a lot of people. In fact, I'll bet there's a lot of people that thought that's how it worked now. But no, it doesn't. This is a good policy overall, I think. Maybe people will be much more accountable when they stand to lose money. But it also takes us into a weird area. You know, I'm thinking about homeless people. They don't have any money. If they had money, they probably wouldn't be homeless. So let's say a homeless person, whatever happens, whatever crime it is, they get arrested. They're not going to get bail unless they can put money down, but they don't have any money. So does that mean that if you're homeless or if you're broke, if you're inherently poor, if you get arrested, you can just forget about getting out before you have your court date? Is that how this is going to work? Or are there going to be exceptions for people who don't have a lot of money? If somebody gets arrested, is there going to be a threshold? I.e., they need to have X number of dollars in the bank before we'll assign them a specific amount? Or are we just going to make the amounts really, really, really low so that just about anybody can do it? Even someone who's broke might be able to find a bail bondsman. Or are we going to get bail bonds people here in Ontario now? Oh, interesting one. Are they going to have to go to a bail bonds person or someone on the street and say, listen, I need $50 for bail and then I can get out of jail? Because I have a feeling they'll be able to do it, and I'm sure there's some community groups that'll get involved in this as well. But either way, the concept I think is interesting. It should make people more accountable. It's just I worry about those people who don't have a lot of money and those who are going to slip through the cracks. Some people have got money, but it's not available in cash. It's tied up in this, that, or the other thing. There's a lot of reasons that I think we need to talk about this. There should certainly be public consultations, and we've got to make sure that we get the balance right. Will it be more effective? Probably. But the devil's going to be in the details, and we've got to make sure that the execution is sound. So I don't mean execution like executing people, by the way. I just want to specify that. But that's another conversation that we could have. Anyway, Ontario proposing changes to the bail system. You'll have to put down cash and you'll get your money back if you behave yourself. Interesting proposal from the Ontario government. Now, another issue involving the province is infrastructure. This is a real quick history lesson, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit and give you a little summary as I remember it. If you go back to the late 90s, the taxpayers of Ontario spent a heck of a lot of money to build a new highway across the top of Toronto. And that highway allowed people to bypass a lot of the traffic on the 401. That's the busiest highway in North America, by the way. And as Premier Ford points out every time he wants to talk about getting highways built or building his tunnel under the 401, he says Ontario loses $56 billion a year in lost productivity to cars that are sitting, being unproductive in gridlock on the 401. So we've got this 407 highway that's now been built and paid for by the taxpayers of Ontario, and it runs parallel to the 401 right across the top of Toronto. And it's basically empty. In some areas, it's like 6 lanes in each direction. But the province sold that highway to a foreign company. They took over $3 billion for it back in the late 90s, and they used it to help pay down Ontario's debt. Okay, I mean, arguably, that's a smart move. Hey, you sell something off, you use the money, pay off the debt, and then we can all prosper a little bit more. But we still have this highway here that's now foreign owned or leased. Now, the 407 has gone crazy since they took over, raising the rates on tolls to the point where it's completely unaffordable. Let me tell you just a few of the highlights from the 407. You need a transponder. It's a little electronic device that you use Velcro strips and put on your windshield. And every time you get on the highway or get off the highway, it logs it and it sends you a bill for that. Well, if you want to have one of those transponders, it's $5 a month to lease it. And by the way, if you lose it or it gets broken, it's $50 to replace it. If you don't have a transponder, you're going to get charged $1 per trip. You're going to get an account fee monthly of $5. Because you don't have a transponder, the cameras where you get on and off the highway, they've got to take a picture of your plate, and then they've got to figure out what your plate is and bill you. So they're going to charge you $5.30 more per trip. And then there's all kinds of other fees. For example, if you have an NSF fee, $35. If there's an enforcement fee, like they have to go to the ministry and say, this person's not paying their bill, don't renew their plate, that's $25. If you want to dispute the charges, it's $100. I mean, this company is just nickel and diming everybody that uses the highway. And then on top of that, the tolls are absolutely staggering. For example, if you are driving through Zone 8, I'm not exactly sure which area Zone 8 is, but if you take it during prime time at 7 o'clock in the morning, between 7 and 9:30, it's $1.09 per kilometer that they're going to charge you to use this highway. Now, the 407 here would argue they need to charge high rates so that only some people use it, so that it stays open and flowing and they can guarantee a smooth drive on their highway. Well, the rest of the people who don't want to pay that kind of money to drive on an Ontario road, they've got to sit in gridlock. Basically, if you've got money, you can skip the line. You can just carry on with your day and nobody's going to care. You don't have to worry about those peasants that are on the 401 or other major routes because you're moving along because you got money. Well, I mean, we don't allow that in the healthcare system. You can't skip the line. We don't allow that in many places, that you can just skip the line if you've got money. So why would that apply on roads that taxpayers paid to build? Here's my suggestion. Now that the 407 has announced they want to raise rates even more, January 1st, 2026, that's in, I think, 38 days or 37 days, they want to raise it by up to 34 cents a kilometer in some areas and in some peak periods. A 34 cent per kilometer increase coming to the 407. I think that's completely preposterous. Any reasonable person hearing that thinks that that's probably ridiculous. Now, the 407 tried to say in their news release here, which I'm looking at right now, they tried to say for the average person with a transponder, this will be about a $5 a month increase. I don't know how they came to that number, but I'd really like to see their math because I don't believe them. And kind of like when they say, oh, the average property tax increase is only going to cost the average household $1 or $2 a month. And then it's costing you a lot more than that. It's the same thing here. They put that out to try and shut people up so there's no dissension and they can just put through this increase and they say it'll be $5 a month, but in reality, it's going to be a lot more. For some people, a lot more. So that's a completely ridiculous thing to say. Now, they also say here at the 407 that they're still in line or cheaper than a lot of other toll routes in North America. I mean, that's a lie, too. It's just a straight up public relations lie. Let me give you an example. I've used this one before, and I think it's relevant, but I can tell you that it's true. If you take the New York State Thruway, you get on the highway in Buffalo, New York, and you want to take it all the way across the state of New York to the Massachusetts border, the New York Thruway. That trip, which is about 420 miles, is going to cost you under $20. Under $20. Now, in contrast, if you take the 407 for about 100 kilometers in prime time, that'll cost you about $70. That's a return trip for a lot of people paying a lot of money. That's how much it is to drive on this highway. And the government has not stepped in and said to these people that run the highway, you can't do that. That's completely ridiculous. You got to stop. Now, I have reason to believe that the pressure is on. The 407, they're probably listening to this podcast right now. They're very media savvy, and I'm sure that they've been alerted to the fact that I'm talking about them. I don't believe your $5 a month increase is accurate, and I don't think you're one of the cheaper highways in North America. So full stop, I think you guys are lying. On top of that, they've started putting up on their signs things like majority Ontario owned and things like that. You guys can say whatever you want. The fact is, you're ripping people off, and Doug Ford is letting you. You are ripping people off. You are saying, if you've got money, here's your free pass. If you don't have money, peasant, just go ahead and sit in traffic and cost the economy $56 billion a year. Now, to Premier Ford's credit, he is working on some alternatives. He's trying to build things like the Bradford Bypass, and he wants to build the 413 highway. And as the 407 basically runs parallel to the 401, the 413 is going to run parallel to the 407, but it won't even go as far. And it's also going to cost a lot of money, and we have to expropriate a whole ton of farmland to build it. And despite that, I'm still not even thinking it's a terrible idea. Doug Ford still wants to build his tunnel under the 401. And again, I don't even think that's a terrible idea. But when you look down the line at how long it's going to take to build the 413, to build the tunnel under the 401, there's only one solution to apparently save us $56 billion a year. That's for the province to take back the 407. And some might say, but it's not for sale, Scott. They don't want to sell. They're making a lot of money. Why would they sell? I'm not asking. I'm telling them. It's our highway, and we're going to annex it. We're just going to take it back. See, we made a choice in Ontario back in the 90s. The government of the day did. That was the Mike Harris government, also a progressive conservative government. They sold the highway. They used the money to pay off some debt. Okay. Well, now, even though we sold it for about $3.7 billion, I'm told, and I confirmed this with with AI. I'm not sure if it's 100% accurate, so I'm just going to put an asterisk on this. If you type it into ChatGPT, how much is the 407 worth? It'll tell you in and around $42 billion. But it costs us $56 billion a year in lost productivity. It makes zero sense to not buy back that highway and make it either no toll so that we can free up the congestion and get people moving again, or low toll. I mean, comparable to how much people in New York State are paying. Again, 415 miles costs you less than $20. 100 kilometers costs you $70 in Ontario. It's completely ridiculous. This is a business that we need to take back. And if the company that owns the majority of it doesn't want to sell, screw them. Again, we're going to annex it and we'll just send them a check for whatever we estimate it's worth. They either negotiate and play ball and we'll take it back from them and end their lease, or we just annex it and leave it in court for the next decade. Those are the only two options. Not buying back the 407 is crazy. We need to do this. Someone at Queen's Park, grab the transportation minister, grab the premier, sit them down and talk to them about what common sense means. If we're losing $56 billion a year in productivity, then spend $42 billion one time, take back the highway and solve a problem for a lot of people. Can we still build the 413? Yeah, absolutely. You still want the tunnel under the 401? Have at it. I don't care. But those are decades away. We need something right now. One more thing, and if you're a new listener, you've probably not heard this one, but if you're one of my OGs, I know you've heard me use this example before, but I think this is an important one that should hopefully move the needle. I think about the amount of parents that are sitting in gridlock on the 401, 5 p.m., their kid's got a lacrosse game or a soccer game or a hockey game or t-ball coming up at 6, and you've got a choice. You can either miss it, you can get there late, or you can pay $25, $30, $40, $50 and make it on time. Nobody should have to make that choice. Nobody should. The province could right a wrong tomorrow. Tomorrow they could do this. They could phone that company and say, we're taking it back, close up your offices, and we'll send you a check. Bye. They could do that. And as of tomorrow, make it no or low toll. I'd prefer no toll. There should be no profiteering off of people that drive. We already pay more than enough for the privilege of driving, not the least of which is through all the taxes on gas. And then there's many more as well. Either way, this has got to be done. Someone talk to the premier, someone talk to the transportation minister. They both seem like nice gentlemen. Get them to go with the way of common sense. Get the 407 back. It's got to happen before this ridiculous increase kicks in on January the 1st. And by the way, if they aren't already on the phone with the 407 saying, what are you, crazy? You want to raise it again up to 34 cents per kilometer. Not a chance. This cannot happen. Families can't afford it. Not now, not here. And by the way, while we're on this topic, before I move on to something else here, I just want to say selling infrastructure is preposterous. We were going through this exercise in Ottawa right now. I just watched Mark Carney overseas in the UAE and in South Africa talking about stuff like this. He wants to attract foreign investment into infrastructure. So what, are we going to bring in the Emiratis to build a port in Hudson's Bay? Why would we do that? If it's something that we need and it's in our national interest, then we should do it. We have all the other highways that we, the taxpayers, paid for, and now we get to use them. Why on earth would we let a foreign company come in and open up a port and charge whatever they want and set whatever rules they want? No, infrastructure gets paid for out of tax dollars and they remain free for the people. That's all there is to it. We don't need foreign companies owning our highways. It's preposterous. Somebody do something at Queen's Park and solve this problem. There is one other issue that I'm going to mention provincially, and then I'll move on. Today, the province is going to propose something called, what is the name of it? Andrew's Law. Andrew's Law. I don't know the details on who Andrew was, but I do know that this is going to go after people that are driving dangerously. It's going to impose lifetime license suspensions for anyone convicted of dangerous driving causing death. Did I read that right? I did. I'm reading this verbatim from the government's media release. I thought this would be maybe a repeat dangerous driving offender, but no. They say a lifetime license suspension for anyone convicted of dangerous driving causing death. Okay, this will allow police to immediately suspend a driver's license for 90 days and impound a vehicle if they have reason to believe someone is driving dangerously. Okay, so they're drawing a parallel between impaired driving and dangerous driving. It's the same punishment, by the way, when you get caught for impaired. They suspend your license on the spot for 90 days and they impound your vehicle. They're also going to increase fines and vehicle impoundment periods for driving with a suspended license. First offense, your car is going to get impounded for 2 weeks and your fine will be between $2,000 and $10,000 for driving with a suspended license. Okay, I think that we've got to talk about this one too. There's a lot of people who have been complete losers on the road and they deserve to have their license suspended because they can't fit in with the rest of us. They do dangerous things. They're reckless. They could kill somebody. Sure. If their license is suspended by a judge, that's fine. If you get caught driving with a suspended license, yeah, you should be punished for that harshly. But they also suspend your license for things like not paying a ticket. Imagine if someone doesn't pay a ticket, and I have to assume it's either because they have a legitimate legal dispute on that ticket or they just don't have the money. You want to impound their vehicle for 14 days and jam them with a $2,000 to $10,000 fine? Second offense, 1 month impoundment and a $5,000 to $15,000 fine. They also want to introduce a new 7-day roadside license suspension for careless driving and a 30-day suspension for careless driving causing bodily harm or death. Hey, clearly they're taking the issue seriously and clearly they're getting strict on crime and punishment here, but we got to make sure we're going after the right people. Good people make mistakes. If you, for whatever reason, didn't pay your ticket, yeah, they'll probably suspend your license. It's bad enough you've got to pay a reinstatement fee to get your license back. Driving to Service Ontario to do that could land you with a 14-day impoundment and a $2,000 to $10,000 fine. That's harsh. That's really harsh. I hope that we have some good conversations before any of these things go through, because a lot of that is very, very harsh and probably not necessarily targeting the real people on the roads that deserve to be targeted. Going after good people who made a mistake, going after good people who are broke, that's not a solution, and that's not going to do anything to make the roads safer. I'm sorry, but it's not. I'm going to move on here. Thank you for hearing me out on a couple of Ontario issues. There are other things that I want to get on your radar. I'm going to start off with some good news coming out of Ukraine. There's a report now, as I record, from Fox News that Ukraine has agreed to the peace deal with Russia. Yesterday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Geneva talked about how much progress they'd made. Listen to this. It's about a minute and a half long.
We had a very good day today. I think we made a tremendous amount of progress, even from the last time I spoke to you, and I apologize for keeping you waiting, but there was more work to be done. You know, we began almost 3 weeks ago with a foundational document that we socialized and ran by both sides, and with input from both sides. And one of the things that happens when you've been involved in this now for 10 months is you get a pretty good sense of what the priorities and the red lines and the important issues are for both sides. And so that allowed us to create a foundational document, which has been an ongoing working document. In fact, over the last 96 hours or more, there's been extensive engagement with the Ukrainian side, including our Secretary of the Army and others being on the ground in Kyiv, meeting with relevant stakeholders across the Ukrainian political spectrum in the legislative branch and the executive branch and the military and others to further sort of narrow these points. We arrived here today with one goal, and the goal was to take, is 28 points or 26 points, depending on which version as it continued to evolve, and try to narrow the ones that were open items. And we have achieved that today in a very substantial way. Now, obviously, like any final agreement, they'll have to be agreed upon by the presidents, and there are a couple issues that we need to continue to work on. But I think the report today is that I think today was worthwhile. It was very, very. It is probably the most productive day we have had on this issue, maybe in the entirety of our engagement, but certainly in a very long time. But work remains, and because this continues to be a working process, I don't want to declare victory or finality here. There's still some work to be done, but we are much further ahead today at this time than we were when we began this morning and where we were a week ago for certain.
That all sounds very, very encouraging. No more dead Ukrainians. No more dead Russians. Stop the fighting. Let's figure it out. And again, as I record, that is just breaking from Fox News that it looks like the peace plan that you just heard Secretary of State Rubio talking about has been accepted by the Russians and the Ukrainians. Good news. And I hopefully will be talking about a peace deal tomorrow in After 9. Let's keep going. Yesterday, outside the House of Commons in Ottawa, a collective of Conservative members of Parliament talked a little bit about something that I talked about earlier, crime in this country. And they've got some common sense proposals that they want to put forward. This is, again, a group of Conservative members of Parliament. Not a whole bunch of names that I recognize here, but either way, we should hear what they have to say. This is what they're going to propose to the government.
This is a crisis that the community is facing. And the sad reality is that Mark Carney was just in that neighborhood this weekend. Instead of meeting with victims, with their families, with business owners, and having a conversation with law enforcement, he decided to take a walk on the beach while eating donuts. He didn't have the human decency to show up and have conversations, to stand up for a community that is crying for help. I can tell you, Pierre Poilievre and our Conservative team, every single member that is standing here with us today has met with victims. And as Frank and as Tim have mentioned, Conservatives have taken action when the Liberals have failed. We brought in Bill C-381 last Parliament. Liberals voted against that. I tabled my Jail Not Bail Act that would put repeat violent offenders, including extortionists, behind bars. We brought a motion to fast track that. Liberals voted that down as well. They talk about RCMP, but the Minister for Public Safety hasn't even hired a single new officer and says it's not his job. This Liberal government has let in 18,000 known criminals with serious convictions into our country with their reckless immigration policies, their open border policies, and without doing any background checks. Canadians are terrified and they want action. Conservatives have taken that action while Liberals make excuses on extortions. Conservatives will bring in stronger self-defense laws. We will repeal Liberal bail that releases these extortionists on our streets. We will bring in minimum mandatory sentencing to put these repeat violent offenders behind bars where they belong, and we'll kick out any non-citizen who is convicted of serious crimes like extortion. And we've called for an emergency debate. Again, that's been blocked as well. So we're ready to take action, and we're happy to take any questions you might have today. Thank you.
Okay, that is Member of Parliament Arpan Khanna, Member of Parliament for Oxford. Yeah, I'm interested in a few things that he said there. I wish there was a few more details, but the Conservatives, if elected, not only plan to get tough on bail and repeal a whole bunch of laws that make it easy for criminals to get out, but a couple of interesting ones. Deport right away non-citizens that are convicted of serious crimes. Can we all agree that that's probably long overdue? Coming here to Canada, and you're not a citizen, but if you come here to Canada and you choose not to follow our laws and you commit a serious crime, no questions asked, you get deported. The other thing he suggested there was strengthening Canada's self-defense laws. Does that mean the Conservatives are going to propose castle law? Because if they do, I'm very interested. I think that that is something that is long overdue in Canada. I think that that's something we need. Homeowners, anybody really, deserves to have legal protection so they can use whatever force they think is necessary to defend themselves, their property, their family. Full stop. While we are in Ottawa, yesterday, Elizabeth May, leader of the Green Party, stood up and used her time in the House of Commons to criticize the federal government. Now, as you're listening to this, please keep in mind, this is the same Elizabeth May The drama queen who put on that big show last week about how she hated to do it and she hated the budget, but she was going to support it because Mark Carney has a great resume and she believes him when he says we're going to hit our Paris 2030 climate accord targets. Okay, well, the honeymoon appears to be over even for Elizabeth May.
Canadians do want to diversify trade, but we want to diversify trade with democracies that share our values, that respect human rights. Now we're cozying up to People's Republic of China. I haven't heard they're starting to treat the Uyghurs well. I don't understand how we can want to do deals with countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates that right now has been caught with personnel carriers carrying out war crimes in Sudan. Do we trade away our values? Do we trade away our souls when we trade with those countries?
Respect for human rights, labor, and the environment remain at the heart of our trade policies and our high-standard trade agreements. Canada is deliberate and mindful when negotiating trade agreements, and we prioritize Canadian values. Building new trading partners around the world is an important driver to promote Canadian.
Okay, you know what? You heard Elizabeth. Obviously, she's very angry. And then you started to hear the response. That is from Liberal Member of Parliament Maninder Sidhu. He's reading his answer, like reading it verbatim right off of a script. He's reading the answer. That's completely unacceptable. If you're a minister in government and you can't even answer a basic question about your own policies, that's something that is just disqualifying. You've got to go. They should get rid of that guy. By the way, there's some rumors floating around that something that a lot of Canadians have wanted for a very long time may be about to happen. There's reports that Melanie Joly is not all that happy in the Mark Carney cabinet, and she has been fishing for a very plum appointment. She wants to be our ambassador to France. When you get appointed ambassador, you are set. That is the gig. You get treated like royalty. You get diplomatic immunity. You get a full staff. You get so many perks, including a beautiful residence to live in. The two most plum positions in Ottawa are ambassador to the UK or high commissioner to the UK and ambassador to France. Melanie Joly wants the ambassador to France position, and that would mean she would have to leave Mark Carney's cabinet shortly after Chrystia Freeland. Ooh, it's amazing how the Trudeau team is starting to get a little frustrated with the Carney team. Speaking of Mark Carney, there are committee hearings happening in Ottawa right now where they're interviewing folks from Brookfield. Brookfield is the company that Mark Carney used to run. And at one point, they were Canadian-based. However, right before Mark Carney ran to be leader of the federal Liberal Party and become prime minister, he moved Brookfield to New York. Now, why would he do that? Trump had already announced tariffs at the time, by the way, so he was probably reading the writing on the wall, figuring things were about to get bad in Canada and the grass was going to be greener in America. So he moved Brookfield and then he stepped down. And there's been a lot of hay made about his conflicts. You see, Mark Carney may have left Brookfield, but he didn't have to divest his investments. He didn't have to sell off his investments in order to become prime minister. They're in what's called a blind trust. And what that means is somebody else manages Carney's assets and his financial interests. But let's be clear. Mark Carney knows what assets he has. Mark Carney knows every single stock he owns. He also knows what would happen if he announced news that was great for Brookfield. His stock would go up. So what happened yesterday in this committee hearing was a couple of members of parliament for the Conservative Party, Michael Barrett is who you're about to hear in just a second, were trying to ask the folks at Brookfield to explain how Mark Carney still impacts his own investments and can use his authority as prime minister to enrich himself, to make himself money. I hope this isn't too hard to follow along with. Give this a listen. This is from yesterday in Ottawa.
When Brookfield's value increases, the value of stock options and deferred share units also increase. That's how these instruments work, correct?
Yes, when our share price increases, the value of those instruments do increase, yes.
And that basic reality doesn't change simply because those instruments would be placed in a blind trust. The value would still rise when the value of Brookfield rises, correct?
Yes.
So if someone holds Brookfield options and units in a blind trust or not, they personally benefit when Brookfield performs well. Isn't that right?
Anybody who holds those instruments, whether during employment or following employment, derives the benefit from those instruments. That's correct.
Any instrument can be sold, bought back, cash settled, or unwound in an instance where, for example, if Parliament required by law divestment by sale. That possibility exists, correct?
The Prime Minister would have certain instruments as part of our long-term incentive plans. There are certain instruments that are less liquid than others. I'm happy to get into the details of that if you wish.
I would, but the premise is what I need to settle, is that they can be sold, bought back, or cash settled, or unwound. It is possible, should it be a requirement. Is that correct?
Yes, it's possible.
Thank you. They're long dated, so we get that. But that's generally how compensation contracts work. That's not some kind of that's not something unique to Mr. Carney, since you brought him up.
Well, long term, yes. In some cases, exercisable in shorter horizons. In some cases, the ultimate value is received far into the future.
Can you explain briefly how stock options or deferred share units and notional long-term incentive plans work at Brookfield? What drives their value?
Yes, I'd be happy to, and I will try to be brief. Helpfully, all disclosure relating to Brookfield stock options and deferred share units is disclosed in detail in our public filings, so it's very much available. In a nutshell, stock options are rights to acquire shares of Brookfield at a certain price. And those exist and during their pendency are exercisable, subject to vesting, because when we award them, people take subject to vesting schedules. So even though you awarded them, they have to vest during the time that you are with Brookfield, and then exercisable for stock that can then be sold into the market. Deferred share units are slightly different. They also track the value of a Brookfield share, but they are not actually shares. And when they mature, they are paid out to the individual based on the value of the share at that time. They are the second component to some of our LTIP programs.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. That was Justin B. Beber. Justin Beber from the Brookfield Corporation, answering questions there from Michael Barrett, Conservative Member of Parliament, who's doing a great job there in Ottawa doing this committee work. What you just heard, and again, I hope you were able to follow it because this is an important detail. What you just heard was Brookfield admitting that every time Mark Carney does something that's good for Brookfield, whether he brings them in to build trailer park homes or whatever, AI investment, you name it, he personally benefits from it. It's a conflict of interest. And it's always going to be that way as long as we maintain the current system we have. What would you think of this? If you want to hold Canada's highest office, if you want to be the Prime Minister, you have to divest all your investments. You're not allowed to hold stock. The Americans are going to be talking about this because their former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, made hundreds of millions of dollars in stock options and stock trading while she was in government. And she likely had access to a lot of information about things that were happening with major corporations. Do the math. It seems like insider trading. Now, I'm not accusing Nancy of anything, but it certainly sounds like she had insider information and based her trades off of that. Do we want our Prime Minister to be able to do that? Because it seems like a very reckless thing for us to do. We should talk about that. Maybe to be Prime Minister, once you take office, you should have to liquidate all of your stock, all of your investments, anything that's not fixed. It's something we should talk about because that would, again, increase integrity and honesty in government. There is another thing I want to play. This is actually from November 22nd. So this was on Friday. Couldn't get it into the pod, but it was an immigration hearing that happened in Ottawa. This is, it speaks for itself. This is crazy, but listen to this.
I'll just ask Ms. O'Gorman, do you know the number? just the number of what percentage are warrants of those 30,000 removal orders? Just the number, please. Approximately even.
30,000 removals in progress of people we are engaging. We have 32,000 warrants for people that we are looking for.
32, I beg your pardon? There are 32,000 warrants?
People who are in our wanted inventory that we are actively looking for.
I'm sorry. You have...
And I'll point out, all of this is posted publicly. These aren't secret numbers. They're on the CBSA website.
So you know them, but the minister doesn't. Okay. So I'm sorry. There are 32,000 people set for deportation that are on warrant, which means you don't know where they are. Am I clear?
Correct. We are looking for them. And I will point out, these, as I said, are points in time. And so since we last met, we have removed more of those people on warrant. And then, unfortunately, we have had people who have absconded. These are fluid.
I understand.
And 500 CBSA officers doing excellent work all of the time to remove these individuals.
Ma'am, with all due respect, we have 30,000 deportation orders. This is half of Kamloops we're talking about. That 32,000 people are lost. I'm just going to leave it there and give the time to MP Kirkland. I'm just befuddled at that number. Thank you.
Probably could have come up with another adjective, but I certainly understand the sentiment. That was Conservative Member of Parliament Frank Caputo talking to Aaron O'Gorman of the CBSA. How do you lose 32,000 people? Where are they? I assume they're still in Canada. Presumably, they're still getting checks and benefits. But we want them to leave, and now they've gone dark, and we can't find them. 32,000 people that the government is looking for. 32,000! It's bananas. Now, maybe you're wondering, how did it get this bad? Like, surely the Liberals are not that bad at this. Tell me they're not that bad. Oh, I think I can answer that for you. Let me do this one. This will be the last one, I think. Getting close to time here. Steve McKinnon, senior Liberal. He is the government House leader. Listen to him yesterday. Try and link anyone who disagrees with the Liberals' current immigration strategies to MAGA Republicans. Listen to this gaslighting right here.
Last week, the member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies repeated MAGA claims that immigration and immigrants are a drag on the Canadian economy.
Mr. Speaker, things are getting out of hand on the other side of the House.
Repeating of these MAGA claims came in the wake of the member for Calgary, Midnapore.
So if you are not happy with the current status quo when it comes to immigration, you are doing MAGA talking points. Okay, so let's just draw the comparison here. Let's make it very black and white. If you don't like the way the immigration system is being run, you're a conservative. If you don't think this government knows what they're doing when it comes to immigration, you're now a conservative. That's from the Liberals. If you think it is crazy that you have to wait 12 hours in an emergency room because our healthcare system is so overrun by people who aren't really supposed to be here, you're now a conservative. That's what the Liberals say. That's what they say. You know what? I got time here. I'm just going to play a little bit of the exchange yesterday in question period in Ottawa. The Prime Minister was not there yesterday. Still recovering from his trip to the G20 and his trip to the UAE. He had himself a good time, apparently. He couldn't make it into work when he got back. So again, that same member of Parliament you just heard, Steve McKinnon, was answering questions on behalf of the Prime Minister. Now, this was the first question period since the Prime Minister made that major gaffe by saying, "Who cares?" when he flipped off a female reporter from the CBC. By the way, the CBC went over the top yesterday, trying to apologize and explain what the Prime Minister meant. Oh, he wasn't telling her who cares. He wasn't telling the Canadian people who cares. He just didn't like the question. He was tired. He was frustrated. The media's job is not to apologize for the prime minister or put words in his mouth or explain what he meant. That's the prime minister's job. He said, who cares? And I believe that that is his attitude. I believe it. Who cares? He doesn't. This came up in the House of Commons, and you're going to hear a little bit of Pierre Poilievre in a second. But first off, let's start off again with the Liberal Leader of the House, Steve McKinnon, talking about how if you don't support the Liberals on immigration, you're a MAGA Republican. You're a conservative.
House Leader may continue.
So the member said repeated mega claims that immigrants are a drag on our economy. I think Canadians want to know whether the Leader of the Opposition approves this kind of language, and will he sanction the member, yes or no?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister claimed during the last election that the U.S. tariffs were an existential crisis, and I quote, requiring that he immediately be elected to, quote, negotiate a win and get a deal by July 21st. Well, a few days ago, he was asked about the state of those negotiations, and he said there are no issues of importance to discuss. In fact, he said, who cares? Mr. Speaker, we care. We care about the workers who've lost their jobs and don't have paychecks to make their mortgage payments. Why doesn't he care?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Monsieur le Président, on trouve un peu que ça dérape.
Mr. Speaker.
Coward. Answered it in French. Okay, friends, gotta go. Have yourselves a great day. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Scott Fox After 9, just like this, presenting the audio, giving you a little bit of discussion, a little bit of context where I can, admitting my bias and admitting when I'm not fully up to speed on a specific issue and encouraging you to do the work yourself. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're brand new to the pod, and there are quite a few new listeners, it seems, from the numbers, welcome. I'm really glad to have you. I do this every single day. One of the things that I'm going to be watching for over the next couple of days and weeks is something that is showing up on Polymarket as a safe bet at the moment. It was reported by TMZ, who, by the way, has a pretty good track record on these sort of things, that President Donald Trump is preparing to announce to the world that we have had contact with extraterrestrial life, that aliens have come to Earth. They may even be fully integrated into society. They might be. I don't know what he's going to say. I don't even know how he's going to do it. Is this a primetime Oval Office address? I don't know. But I'm very curious, and we'll be watching for that as well. Have a great one. I'll see you back here in less than 24 hours. Oh,